This video is to show how to model the prosthetic forearm in TinkerCAD. If you've already seen the previous video on building the humerus or the upper arm, you'll know that the forearm we're working off of this upper drawing. So I will go a little faster here to make this arm, and then we're going to show you a couple other tricks along the way. So I'll start with a 235 millimeter by 25 millimeter by 4 millimeter rectangle. By 235. Hit enter to get there a little faster. Now I might want my snap grid to be something more in the 300 millimeter square, or at least a little larger. I don't think it really affects anything in the long run if it's not fitting perfectly. I can hold the shift button and rotate that around. Okay. Now I will drop a ruler, or I can also hit the R button as a nice shortcut for the ruler. And I'll place that on a major grid line. Use the midpoint to 0. The rectangle on that midpoint. I think I hit something other than the midpoint there. So I'm going to Control Z to undo. What I actually want to do is start by using the endpoint to 0 to the ruler. Then I'll switch to midpoint and 0 that. So here we are. Now we're going to need several to add several holes, increasing the number of sides. I'll use that Alt shortcut to make some copies for what it's worth here. Okay, the two larger holes are going to be 7 millimeters by 7. And let's place, oh, we only need one. So that one is, while I'm here, a small 3.5 millimeter hole at 15 and 127. And this larger one is at 65. So notice when I'm not on orthographic, when I'm on perspective view, you'll see the advantage of switching to flat view for these alignments. Okay, so this needs to be to the midpoint is 65 millimeters. And this needs to be 0 to center it up. Okay, I can delete one of these. I could actually delete probably 2 because I just want to make one of these 3.5 millimeters in diameter. So 3.5 by 3.5. I'll go ahead and delete this and rather just 0 this dimension. I think this one was 15, but I will double check that. Okay, so here we are at 15 millimeters in, 65 to the larger one, and then another one at 127. So we have this one at 15 and 0. I'm going to Control C, Control V, and I'll need to re-zero that because it did place a little offset, but this is at 167 millimeters. Okay, that should be ready to go mostly, so I'll Control A, select everything, and Control G to group it. Now there's another step or two in the forearm that involves gluing some things together with spacers right here. So maybe I can zoom in a little bit, see that picture better. Okay, there's no specific information given on the size of the spacer, and it's somewhat hard to tell, but I believe that one spacer is on the end that has the cardstock, and the other spacer seems to need to go right where the large 1/4-inch drill hole is. I figured that out further on in the assembly. Looking here, it looks like the spacer has the hole through it. You especially see that here when adding the straw for a bearing, that larger hole goes through this spacer. So I might guess that spacer is in the neighborhood of 20 millimeters wide. I don't think it exactly matters. So the way I may approach this, we know the spacer is 4 millimeters thick. That's a given. So I might make this 4 by 20. I think it's going to need to be 25 millimeters tall to match up with the height of the others. That dimension I meant to be 20. This dimension here, just to clarify, this is this dimension, needs to be 25. Okay, I will drop that on the work plane. Probably just get the ruler out of here because that's just creating more information than we need. I think I need to rotate this way. Nope. I need to rotate this rotation to 90 degrees. Holding the shift button so that I'm going in larger increments. Now we'll notice again that rotation took it off the work plane, so D for drop. Now to add these spacers, I believe I need one spacer lined up more or less with that hole. I might almost be okay with just doing that visually, and the other spacer lined up with this end. Okay, so I'm going to hold Alt and make a copy here. All right, and I'm going to select all of these items and use my L for align tool to line up their ends together. Try top view here. Now I could use a ruler or something. I think I will just visually zoom in about as far as I can here to bring these pieces together. Again, my snap is set to 1 millimeter, so I can feel rather confident that these things are lined up as I want them. The next step is probably going to be to hold the Alt button. Now notice this doesn't always work on Chromebooks, I've noticed. So you might be kind of stuck doing the Control C, Control V. Another little trick here. What we're going to do is take this piece and ungroup it. That's going to bring back that hole, which I should be able to select and just bump it over so it goes through everything. Then I'll move this piece, this spacer piece down. I don't think things have to be perfect. I know that with that 1 millimeter snap, that's not going to be perfect in the center, but I think it certainly serves its purpose. I could get, I could either make this a 1.5 millimeter snap or use the ruler to measure some of these things. Last step here is going to be to select everything and group everything, which will put a hole in that spacer. I actually think I did this wrong. This spacer was supposed to not have this hole in it, but rather this one. So let's, I could ungroup everything, or I can just Control Z, top view, and it was supposed to be this larger hole going through this spacer, so I just need to move that down. Okay, Control A, Control G. And I think we have our final piece ready for 3D printing and ultimately for assembly. Yep, see that both of these holes are aligned and go all the way through, and our spacers on the end.